Good day. I am Gabriel LONTOC together with Julio Gandia, Nylzer Mendoza, Erin San Miguel, and Michael SHOEBRIDGE, and we are going to present our research study. But before we tackle our chapters 4 and 5, which includes our data analysis, I will first give a brief introduction about our research, entitled A Study on the Influence of Several Factors on the Entrepreneurial Intentions of De La Salle University Manila Senior High School ABM students. First, for our statement of the problem. Our study aims to have a definitive answer for this general problem. Do the given factors influence the entrepreneurial intentions of the DLSU SHS ABM students? By factors, we refer to perceived desirability, perceived feasibility, personal motivation, personal traits, role models, and subjective or social norm. With that, our specific problems are: does each factor have an influence on the entrepreneurial intentions of the DLSU SHS ABM students? Next is, which factor or factors have the most influence on the entrepreneurial intentions of the LSU SHS ABM students? Another is, what are the reasons that led to certain factors to be considered as the most influential to the entrepreneurial intentions of the LSU SHS ABM students? And lastly, is there a significant difference between the influence of each of these factors on DLSU SHS ABM students' entrepreneurial intentions? In relation to the research problems, the objectives of our research is to know whether the factors influence the entrepreneurial intentions of our chosen demographics, and determine which of the factors have the highest influence to our dependent variable, which is the entrepreneurial intention. For the significance of our study, our research regarding the factors that have the most influence on students' entrepreneurial intention can be a new avenue in which school curriculums and other institutions can pursue to further enhance the students' knowledge and skill with regards to entrepreneurship. Next, for our RRL. Most of our contents were based from other literature. We have gathered the contents for our research by finding a variety of related literature about entrepreneurial intention, entrepreneurial intentions in the Philippines, entrepreneurial intentions of senior high school students, the theory of planned behavior, the entrepreneurial event model, and the different factors as an antecedent of entrepreneurial intentions. For our research gaps, it generally revolves around these three. First are the gaps on factors that may influence the entrepreneurial intentions. Second are the gaps on the study's context. And third are the gaps on the study's chosen respondents. Lastly, for our frameworks. So the theoretical framework that we used in our study was Ajzen's theory of planned behavior. To make it applicable and much relatable for our study, we slightly modified the framework, where our independent variables arrow and points to our dependent variable. With that, the hypotheses of our study are: the factors have an influence on the entrepreneurial intentions of the DLSU SHS ABM students, and there is a significant difference between the influence of the factors on the entrepreneurial intentions of the DLSU SHS ABM students. That sums up the brief introduction on our research study.
Good day, everyone. I am Michael SHOEBRIDGE here to discuss the research design, research scale, and methods of data collection of our research. Research design. For research design, the group decided that correlative research will be enforced so as to achieve knowledge about the relationship between two or more variables. Moreover, it was made use to ascertain the effects, if any, of the independent variables to the dependent variable. The study aims to deduce the impact of the external environment, perceived desirability, perceived feasibility, personal motivation, personal traits, social norms, and role models of the DLSU Senior High School ABM students. The study shall utilize a quantitative method in achieving its objectives. Different data will be collected and gathered through questionnaires that are to be disseminated online via Google Forms. For the researchers to be able to analyze the relationships between different variables, the Likert scale shall be used. After analyzing the data, conclusions and recommendations shall be given from the results from the quantitative method to have a better understanding of the independent variable impact to the entrepreneurial intention of the DLSU Senior High School ABM students. Research locale. The study would revolve around the influence of certain factors on the entrepreneurial intention of senior high school students here in the Philippines. With this in mind, the researchers would specifically focus on grade 11 and 12 ABM students of De La Salle University, Manila. They're most likely to be from ages 14 to 20 years old. The researchers have deemed them to be the most qualified respondents since they are the students that are most inclined to pursue entrepreneurship, not only as their collegiate course, but also as their future careers. Though not are all certain to be future entrepreneurs, they are still the respondents with the most potential to have entrepreneurial intent. The methods of data collection. In collecting the necessary data needed, the researchers will conduct a survey wherein each respondents will first-handedly answer each of the questions and state their reasons behind it based on their perspective, making the data that will be collected a primary one. The researchers have decided to gather primary data because of the reliability and accuracy of this information in relation to the current research questions and objectives of the study. Under the methods of data collection is the survey questionnaire. The survey questionnaires will comprise of questions that will represent each of the 7 constructs and the dependent variable involved in the study. The survey questionnaire will consist of 3 main sections: the data privacy and consent section, where the researchers explain that all the data the respondents are going to give will only be used for the research and seen by the researchers. The demographics section, where the respondents are going to be asked to input some background information about themselves, which includes age, grade level, sex, and their working email. And the main survey itself, where the questions for each construct will be asked. Next is the 4-point Likert scale measurement. The study uses the 4-point Likert scale to determine the degree of agreeableness of each respondent towards the different constructs included on the study. Instead of using the default 5-point scale, the researchers decided to lower down the rating scale into 4 to remove neutralness in the responses and gather much accurate information. Last is the Cronbach's alpha. The research uses Cronbach's alpha to measure the internal consistency, or how closely related a set of items are as a group. With this, Cronbach's alpha was used to determine the validity of the testers' surveys questions. The survey's answers showed a result of 0.93 overall, even though one of the factors resulted in a negative value. Nonetheless, the survey questions still have a high stake of being tested, because it falls under excellent, according to Cronbach's alpha scores levels.
I'm Julio Gandia, and I'm going to discuss the statistical treatment of data, unit of analysis, sampling design, and the research timeframe. For the statistical treatment of data, the researchers use the descriptive analysis. So according to Learned Statistics, the descriptive analysis is a analysis on the description of the data. It can also provide a summary wherein patterns may occur, patterns may be seen by the researchers upon analyzing the data. This also describes the DLSU senior high school students, the population, and it can gather the population's demographic profile and their viewpoints on the independent variables upon the dependent variables. The study used the weighted mean to get the average of the answers per question on the survey. So with 4 having the highest or the biggest weight, while 1 having the lowest weight. The study also used the normal mean, median, and mode, and the standard deviation to give additional perspective on the information that was gathered in the survey. The researchers also used the Pearson's correlation coefficient. Pearson's correlation coefficient is used as a way to measure the association between two variables. However, it doesn't identify what is the independent or the dependent variable between those two variables. It shows how positively correlated or negatively correlated these two variables that were measured using the Pearson's correlation coefficient. The researchers also used the multiple linear regression to understand the correlation between multiple independent variables and the dependent variable. It shows using the multiple linear regression, it showed the relationship between a number of variables. According to Kenton, in layman's terms, multiple linear regression looks into how numerous independent variables are associated or connected with one single dependent variable. Moving on to the unit of analysis. In this study, the unit of analysis relates or selects a individual level, which is the DLSU ABM senior high school students. These respondents were asked to, or was requested to answer a survey questionnaire on a Google Forms format to determine the influence of the independent variables on the entrepreneurial intention. Next is the sampling design. So the researchers used a convenient sampling design which they deemed needed as they chose the ABM students of the LSU University Manila to conduct an online survey. The total number of the population is 602, and by using the Sloven's formula, we understood that 241 of 602 students are the needed respondents for the survey. This slide here shows the formula in the computation as to how we got 241 students. Finally, the research time frame. The researchers will use a cross-sectional design wherein they'll only compare different variables in a specific point in time. These variables are the independent variable, the entrepreneur factors, and the dependent variable, which is the entrepreneurial intention. Even if the independent variables even if the relationship between the independent variables towards the interpreted intention varies over time. According to Asgen, a cross-sectional design does not lose validity or robustness when it is used in a intention research. Moreover, it provides a glimpse of the relationship between the antecedents. It's like a snapshot.
I'm Erin Miguel, and I'll be talking about the Chapter 5 of this study. To start off, I will be discussing the descriptive analysis. The researchers were able to gather 142 DLSU SHS ABM students to answer the survey questionnaire. First will be the demographics. As seen in this table, the respondents range from 14 to 19 years old. Out of the total sample, the age 17 group had the most respondents with 63, or 44.4% of the total sample. They are followed by the age 18 and age 16 groups, with 46 and 31 respondents, respectively. The age 14 and age 19 group both had one respondent each, while there were no respondents from the age 15 group. Next would be the respondents' genders. There were 99 females from the respondents, which totals to 69.7%. The remaining 43 respondents were all males, which is equivalent to 30.3%. Next up are the independent and dependent variables. For the variables, the researchers determined their weighted mean scores and standard deviations. This table shows the weighted mean scores and standard deviations of perceived desirability. The second statement had the highest weighted mean score, while the fifth statement had the lowest. The next table is for perceived visibility. For this variable, the sixth statement reported the highest weighted mean score, while the first statement had the lowest among all six statements. For subjective norms, the statement with the highest weighted mean score was the first statement, while the lowest was the third statement. For this table, the results for personal traits are tackled. The fourth statement registered the highest weighted mean score, while the fifth statement had the lowest, as seen here. The next table would be for personal motivation. Out of the 9 statements, the third statement had the highest weighted mean score, while the ninth statement had the lowest. They are followed by the results for role models. The first and second statement had the highest and lowest weighted mean scores respectively. Lastly are the results for the dependent variable, entrepreneurial intention. In this table, the fifth statement had the highest weighted mean score, while the second statement had the lowest. The final table for this section is the summary of the descriptive analysis of all quantitative variables. Those collected are the n, which was the total sample, mean, mode, median, and standard deviations of all statements as one construct each. Next will be the correlation results for the variables. The main goal of this study was to determine whether or not the factors can affect the dependent variable, which is entrepreneurial intention. This would be the first step in knowing exactly that. First would be perceived desirability. Based on the researchers' calculations, they found out that there was a correlation of 0.687 and a p-value of less than 0.01. This indicates a positive, significant, and strong correlation between the two variables. For perceived visibility, it's pretty much the same, with a correlation of 0.577 and a p-value of less than 0.001. This also indicates a positive, significant, and strong correlation between the two variables. For subjective norms, there was a correlation of 0.421 and a p-value of less than 0.001. Although there was a positive significant correlation because of the p-value, there was only a medium correlation because the person's R was below 0.5. For personal traits, a correlation of 0.504 and p-value of less than 0.001 was observed. This means that there was a positive, significant, and strong correlation between the variables. For personal motivation, there was a correlation of 0.676 and a p-value of less than 0.001. This means that there was also a positive, significant, and strong correlation between these variables. Lastly, the results for role models. There was a correlation of 0.445 and a p-value of 0.001. This means that there is also a positive, significant correlation, but only a medium correlation between the variables.
The table presented shows the multiple regression analysis between the study's dependent variable, which is entrepreneurial intention, and the study's independent variables, namely perceived feasibility, perceived desirability, subjective norms, personal traits, personal motivation, and role models. In the model, the predictors of entrepreneurial intention, which are the independent variables, showed a variance of 57% with R-squared at 0.57. Alongside the variance, the adjusted R-squared and the overall model's test F-score and significance were also analyzed. They show the value that the model as a whole has a high degree of significance with p less than 0.05, proving the seventh hypothesis. Other than that, each independent variable's estimate, standard error, t-score, and p-value were also analyzed. These showed results that some of the independent variables were able to significantly influence entrepreneurial intention, while there are some that did not. Perceived desirability was able to significantly predict the dependent variable with its estimate at 0.4591 and p-value less than 0.05, thus proving our first hypothesis. Personal motivation was also able to significantly predict the dependent variable with its estimate at 0.4883 and p-value less than 0.05, thus proving the third hypothesis. On the other hand, the remaining independent variables are deemed as not significant. These include perceived feasibility with its estimate at 0.1953 and p-value greater than 0.05, rejecting our second hypothesis. Subjective norms with its estimate at 0.0842 and its p-value greater than 0.05, rejecting our sixth hypothesis. Personal traits with its estimate at 0.0207 and p-value greater than 0.05, rejecting our fourth hypothesis. And lastly, role models with its estimate at 0.0528 and p-value greater than 0.05, rejecting our fifth hypothesis. Once again, I am Nylzer R. Mendoza, and thank you for listening.